criticizing
No,
Netanyahu.
she called me an anti-Semite, by the way.
Well, criticizing Netanyahu's government.
Do you think I'm an anti-Semite, Piers? Oh, because I'm criticizing someone who's responsible for the mass slaughter of innocents.
You're
I'm an anti-Semite. I don't know if you really want to. I don't know if you want to perpetuate that message. That's not a great message.
Welcome to Inside the Debate. Today, we're breaking down the biggest moments from Piers Morgan's latest panel. What begins as a debate over the Iran conflict quickly turns into something far more unexpected. Instead of critics leading the charge, some of Donald Trump's own supporters start asking the toughest questions, challenging the administration's justification for the war and exposing uncomfortable contradictions. As the pressure builds, Trump's remaining defender is forced to answer a relentless barrage of attacks in a debate that shifts from defending policy to defending conflicting narratives.
I mean, they tangle themselves up in this because of all the false promises and pledges that simply haven't been met by reality and continue to be not met by reality. But honestly, Jenna, this idea that the American people, after 4 months of this war that's supposed to last us a couple of weeks, may be in the hook for, $100 billion at a time when gas prices have never been higher. I'm going to California at the end of this week. And, I'm told that gas prices are like twice as much as last time I was there in October. How does any of this make sense? Yeah. And politically, it's so damaging for the Republican chances in the midterm, surely.
Well, you can blame Gavin Newsom for that. I live in Florida where our gas prices are actually okay, thanks to Governor DeSantis. But I would much rather the Senate appropriate money to go to keeping Iran away from nuclear capabilities than funding Arab Sesame Street. I mean, this is exactly why Doge was so deeply popular when Trump first retook office. Hold on, let me finish.
That's a bold claim. What evidence do you have of that?
Let me
What evidence do you have?
I would rather have
nuclear capabilities that they're pursuing. What's the evidence of that?
The point of this mission overall, from the beginning, that was deeply popular, was to prevent Iran from getting nuclear capabilities, and that comes directly from the Department of War. And so, while
Jenna,
we can debate what is the ongoing,
hang on one second.
What is the ongoing
Hang on one
objective?
second. How does that square with the President of the United States a year ago, at the end of the 12-day war, announcing to the world that the Iranian nuclear program had been put back, his words, decades? It turned out it wasn't even 8 months. And then suddenly we're supposed to believe the Iranians were about to attack with a nuclear weapon within days, weeks. That's why there was this urgent sense of a need to attack. None of that makes sense. How can it go from being put back decades with this incredibly successful 12-day war, and then within 8 months, we have to launch a fully fledged war?
Well, I don't think it's a fully fledged war, but I think that intelligence, of course, can change.
What would you call it?
I think he's right to call it a conflict, and the longer that it continues,
it's a war.
The more that Americans,
but we've also been told it's been going on for 47 years.
Here,
it's a 47-year war. How many times have I heard that talking point on television?
The fact that intelligence can change is the fact that the Secretary of War said that the intelligence changed, and we have no evidence to the contrary to disbelieve that the Department of War thought that there was a national security threat. And when our government is telling us that Iran,
I'm just curious what your source is.
Have you looked at everything? Have you looked at everything that the Pentagon has seen? Were you sitting in this situation?
That Iran
don't talk over each other, because we can't actually hear either of you if you do that.
No, So the point, though, is that while we can debate the ongoing conflict or war, whatever you want to call it, yes, Congress hasn't specifically declared war, but you're right, Piers, of the history of the American history of this. I don't think that actually the president needs to have congressional approval at this point for it, but we can debate those ongoing issues. But the fact that this is still a matter of national security, the fact that this appropriation continues, it may, to your point, affect the midterms unless the White House can message this. But I disagree with Caroline in this respect. I don't think that President Trump actually wants to be a wartime president. He wants to be the peace president. What he actually thought he could do was to go into the Iranian government and actually negotiate this memorandum of understanding that clearly didn't happen, because Iran calls the United States the Great Satan. I don't think that and that one particular point, I disagree with the administration that was ever a possibility.
So Jenna, out of interest, if the sole mission statement, and the mission statement has changed dramatically in the last few months, but let's assume for a moment's sake that Donald Trump's, when he says it was all about the nuclear capability, stopping them having a bomb. Okay. As far as I last checked, the Iranians still have every single piece of their enriched uranium. All of it. None of it's been secured. So what does victory look like to you? If they maintain the enriched uranium, they keep it. If they maintain control of the Strait of Hormuz, if the Ayatollah who was killed has been replaced by his son, who's even more hardline, if the IRGC remain in a tight grip on their country, which is why no one's been rising up to protest, if all those things are still in place when the United States pulls out of this, would you say that the conflict, whatever you want to call it, has been a spectacular failure? Because I'll play this tape back to you when that moment happens.
Right. And so, and I have long been an advocate of saying that the initial conflict and going in to ensure that Iran does not have nuclear capabilities is a matter of national security. And again, if we can continue to debate whether the ongoing conflict is appropriate, and I'm not sure that it is. I have been asking that same question on my daily radio program. What is the objective?
Right, but if it ends with the Iranians keeping all their enriched uranium and their regime in place, and the Ayatollah simply replaced by his more hardline son, and there are no protests, and they have control of the Strait of Hormuz, would you accept as being a terrible failure?
I would not say that that would be the appropriate conclusion, which is probably why we are still engaged in this conflict to ensure that we don't leave Iran in that situation.
The first clash exposed just how difficult it is to defend the administration's strategy. But now the debate takes an even sharper turn. What starts as an argument over foreign policy quickly becomes a heated fight over Israel, free speech, and whether criticizing Benjamin Netanyahu is being unfairly labeled as anti-Semitism. This exchange pushes every side into uncomfortable territory.
On this panel, going back to Netanyahu, that he is actually guilty of war crimes and that he needs to face justice and accountability for what? For defending his national sovereignty?
Well, you know, there's one way.
Do we all not remember?
You know the reason I think he might be? Just a little hunch
Your
I have.
anti-Semitism is disgusting.
So anti-Semitism is disgusting, yeah.
Right.
But criticizing Netanyahu.
She called me an anti-Semite, by the way.
Well, criticizing Netanyahu's government.
You think I'm an anti-Semite, Piers?
No, I don't. No.
Oh, because I'm criticizing someone who's responsible for the mass slaughter of innocents.
You're
I'm an anti-Semite. I don't know if you really want to. I don't know if you want to perpetuate that message. That's not a great message. You're literally marketing that anti-Semitism is a good thing.
You know the one way to resolve this?
No, when you argue that you're an anti-Semite for criticizing someone who's carrying out mass slaughter.
Yeah, I think the whole. Honestly, Jenna, the whole shtick of accusing.
I'm not assuming. I'm just not a moron like you are.
Hang on. The whole shtick, honestly, of accusing people who criticise Netanyahu's government of doing bad things, if you do, you're anti-Semitic, is bullshit, and I'm kind of done with that. But what I'm also done with is that Netanyahu is still preventing any members of the foreign media, international press from going into Gaza, despite this supposed ceasefire now being in place for many months. There is no reason other, to me, than he doesn't want the world to see what they've done in Gaza. If you want to exonerate yourself from the charge of committing war crimes in Gaza, let's keep it to Gaza for now, then let the international media in to do their jobs freely, not embedded with the IDF, because there's a ceasefire, shouldn't be any risk to journalists. Let them do their job, and then we can all decide, based on their reporting, whether there's been war crimes. And the reason
that he doesn't, the reason Netanyahu
won't let it happen, the reason Netanyahu won't let people in,
do you think you'd be unbiased?
It's because I believe war crimes have been committed, and that is what will eventually be uncovered. We shall see. But what other reason could there possibly be for not letting the media in?
But the assumption, because they are biased, and the assumption that somehow Israel is situated differently than any other country across the world who can defend themselves. Even all of us sitting here saying America first is actually a good thing, like what Caroline Sunshine said. Well, what about Israel defending its own sovereignty? And that's why I say it is anti-Semitic to somehow suggest that Israel is the only nation. The only nation that can't actually defend.
The strength of America has never come from avoiding tough questions. It has come from asking them. Whether you agreed with every argument tonight or not, one fact remains. The decisions made in Washington affect every American family, every taxpayer, and the future of the country. That's why open debate matters and why these conversations should never be ignored. If you believe more Americans should see debates like this without the spin, help us grow this community. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who wants to stay informed. Your support helps us keep bringing you the biggest political confrontations and the debates shaping America's future. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.